How does one go about studying these plants and compounds? Plants and compounds which produce unimaginable experiences and appear to shed light on some of humanity's greatest mysteries. In order to answer that question, Dr. Strassman conducted the first human psychedelic research in a generation.
One of the things that I had established early on was being able to discriminate between studies in the scientific realm and recreational use. But in the early 1980s, I reviewed all of that literature and could pretty well establish that if people were really carefully screened and supervised and then followed up, that the incidence of adverse reactions to LSD and related psychedelic drugs was extremely low. The drug or the compound or the chemical that seemed like the best candidate to sort of reopen the U.S. Front on psychedelic research would be DMT.
It was really, it was exciting for me because I thought this is the first study in a generation. And not only that, despite the fact that DMT had been used safely in earlier studies and it was this natural component of the brain, DMT is one of the most profound and potent psychedelics known. So it wasn't just an initiation of clinical research, it was a reinitiation of clinical research with an extremely potent drug. I was of the strong opinion that you could do these studies, and Rick agreed. So we had a number of discussions, and at some point the discussion came up, you know, Dave, what if I do all this paperwork and spend all this time and get to the end of things and I'm ready to go and I can't get the DMT? And that was a real possibility because DMT, clinical grade DMT, wasn't a chemical you could just buy off the shelf somewhere. And I told Rick, if you get to that point and no one will make it, then I'll do it. And ultimately, Rick got to that point, and I made it.
The design of the study was fairly straightforward. Give people DMT and measure as many variables as possible. I had to sort of anticipate a lot of objections that would come my way from the regulatory agencies that oversee this kind of research. So at that point began a 2-year process of dealing with not that many regulatory agencies, but fairly monolithic ones. One sort of a sidelight of the protocol was the involvement of a psychiatrist from UCLA named Daniel Friedman. He was kind of one of the grand old men of American psychiatry, and actually he was one of the people who in the 50s and 60s got their start with psychedelic research.
And the main thing that Danny Friedman told us was, don't even get close to psychotherapy. Forget about treating mental illness or alcoholism or anything. Forget that. That's where all the hysteria is. That's where all the fears get up. You're a scientist, Rick. Approach it as a scientist. Do basic, simple measurements. Look at heart rate, cardiovascular parameters. You won't get in trouble doing that. You can get it funded, and it's solid science. Rick did what he said, but then he still was able to get these, accounts of what happened. And that wasn't in the plan. That wasn't really what was proposed in the studies that were funded, and that wasn't what Danny talked about. But those were the spin-off that really made it interesting.
Rick Strassman was advertising in some magazine somewhere about wanting volunteers for a particular study in a psychotropic, and I didn't really know I didn't know DMT from STP at that time. And I remember reading that and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is bad. I better get involved in this and make sure that somebody doesn't get hurt and that at least there'd be some sensitivity towards what this stuff is really about.
I met Rick's research nurse at a party, and she heard me talking about that I had used peyote ceremonially, and she took me aside and said, there's something that you might be interested in. We're looking for subjects, volunteer subjects, for some unusual research.
I was a little concerned that the study participants might be a little obnoxious. Maybe that's not the right word, but people that were just seeking to do a lot of drugs, and they were very professional people. There were varying degrees as to how much hallucinogen use they had been through. It seemed like there were some people that it felt like they had made it their life mission to experience every kind of substance out there, and then other people who I think were just interested for their own personal growth and or curiosity.
Once we actually got into the preparation for the actual trips, Rick asked me about roller coasters. Do you like roller coasters? You know, the sensation of going up really high and then slamming back down towards Earth. And I said, no, I hate them. They're horrible. And he said, not good. I just wanted to go with the experience, learn as much as I could, absorb as much as I could, and be humble to it.
The idea of legally sanctioned psychedelics was just very compelling. Plus, you're in a hospital. So should you get that uncomfortable experience that you're dying, you're with doctors in a very safe environment from that point of view.
I mean, this was really very cutting edge, very out there, it was high risk. And people knew what they were getting into and they wanted to have the extra reassurance. And I was glad, actually, to have a crash cart in the room and a team, you know, in the hospital to respond to any emergencies.
You're in this hospital room and there's all the sounds and the smells and just the prior experiences of being in the hospital. You know, all these negative things come back. So there was the whole environment to be overcome, because little did I know that it didn't matter where I was. I wasn't going to be in my body. I was going to be out in the universe. And it didn't matter where you launched from. It could be a hospital room. It could be the jungle in the Amazon. It didn't matter where you were, because you weren't going to stay there.
Set and setting is so important. It's even more important than the substance. More important than the substance. Set and setting is everything. Now, what is the set and setting when you are blindfolded? The set and setting is not what you're seeing. You're not seeing anything. The set and setting is your internal self. The things that you have learned, the capacities that you have achieved, the conditions of your own psyche and psychology, these are your set and setting.
It's the medicine combined with or interacting with the set and setting that creates an effect of safety, of trust, of comfort, and of resourcefulness that makes it possible for you to take some big leaps and receive some big gifts. And if that's not there, you just get terrified.
So I didn't really have physical fears so much that they would die or have a stroke. I did have some fears about people's mental health, you know, especially with some of the higher doses. We gave